The Ride Home, the real Halloween abduction that terrified a town. Story 2 in the Real Halloween Horror Stories anthology. Halloween night. For most people, it's a time for fun, parties, and harmless scares. But for one young man in Texas, that night would turn into something far more terrifying. What started as a quiet walk home from a party became a real-life nightmare. A story of faith, fear, and a stranger who believed she was saving the world from demons. This is The Ride Home, the real Halloween abduction that terrified a town. It happened in 2017, just outside a small Texas town called Shallow Water. A 19-year-old factory worker, we'll call him Ethan, had gone to a Halloween party with a girl named Rita. They had met at a local cafe, texted for weeks, and finally decided to go out together. Everything was going fine, until Rita's ex-boyfriend showed up, angry, loud. She whispered to Ethan, "You should go before he sees you." So he left. No car, no ride, just a dark road under a cold Texas moon. He figured he'd walk the few miles home. But that decision changed everything. Ethan had been walking for about half an hour when headlights appeared behind him. A silver SUV slowed to a stop. A woman rolled down her window. She looked like a friendly neighbor. Short blonde hair, maybe in her 40s, wearing a purple sweater. "You look cold," she said. "Need a ride?" Her name was Deborah. She said she hated seeing people walking alone at night. Ethan hesitated, but it was late and the air was freezing. He got in. Inside the car, it was warm and quiet. Deborah asked questions. Where he was from, what he did, what he was dressed as. He told her he was Ghostface from a Scream. She laughed softly. Then the conversation drifted. Deborah mentioned religion. She said Halloween was a night full of spirits. Her tone changed. Slower, heavier. She asked, "Dupsh, you believe in demons?" Ethan said no, it was just a holiday. But the question lingered. And so did her smile. After a few minutes, Ethan noticed they weren't heading toward his town anymore. He pointed it out. Deborah simply said, "I just need to stop by a friend's place." The road turned from asphalt to dirt. The lights from town faded behind them. Then the GPS said, "No route found." That's when Ethan started to panic quietly. "Where exactly is your friend's house?" he asked. But Deborah didn't answer. She just kept driving, slower now, almost in rhythm with her own calm breathing. Then, without warning, the car stopped. Ethan looked around. They were in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no lights, just fog and the outline of trees. He started to open the door, but, Deborah said something that froze him. "Don't move." She reached into her door pocket and pulled out a small handgun. "Put this bag over your head," she said, tossing him a black cloth. He thought she was joking. She wasn't. "Put it on," she said again, "or I'll shoot you and say you tried to hurt me." The car fell silent. He slowly pulled the cloth over his face. Ethan couldn't see where they were going, but he could hear. The crunch of gravel, the creak of a wooden door, the smell of hay and dust. When she finally removed the bag, he was inside a barn. Old, dim, with moonlight slipping through the cracks. Deborah tied his hands loosely to a cold metal pole. Then she looked at him, eyes trembling with conviction. "You can't lie to me," she said softly. "I see what you really are." And then she left. When Deborah returned, she wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, stood beside her, clutching a small Bible. "Sweetheart," Deborah said gently, "this man is one of them. But if we pray, God will reveal his true form." The girl looked at Ethan, confused and scared. He begged to them both to stop, said he was just a person, not a demon. But Deborah's eyes filled with tears. "Don't listen to his lies, sweetie. Demons lie." The child started to cry, softly at first, then louder, shaking her head as she looked between Ethan and her mother. "Mummy, I don't see a demon," she whispered. Deborah froze. The lantern's flame flickered as though the air itself had stopped moving. The silence in that barn was so deep that Ethan could hear the child's heartbeat more than his own. Deborah's lips parted slightly. Her face changed. Not angry anymore, not certain, just confused. The conviction that had held her upright all this time began to crack. She turned to Ethan, then back to her daughter. Her voice broke, Maybe Mommy made a mistake. For the first time, Ethan saw something human in her eyes. Fear not of him, but of herself. A trembling hand brushed hair from her face. She looked exhausted, pale under the weak lantern glow. Ethan's voice shook as he spoke. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Everyone makes mistakes. Just let me go, please." Deborah's eyes filled with tears. She turned to her daughter again, gently touching the girl's shoulder. "Go back inside, sweetheart," she said softly. "Mummy just needs a minute." The little girl hesitated, her small frame silhouetted in the doorway, before stepping out into the night. The wooden door creaked closed behind her, leaving the sound of the wind and Deborah's uneven breathing. Deborah stood there for a long moment, staring at Ethan, like she was seeing the world for the first time. Then in a whisper she said, "I thought I was helping him. I thought I was doing his work." Her words drifted like dust in the cold air. Ethan didn't respond. He just nodded faintly, afraid that even a wrong word could snap her back into whatever belief she'd come from. Finally she sighed, a long broken sound. She untied the ropes, trembling so much that it took 2 tries. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Outside, the air was sharp and still. The fog had thickened, curling through the fields like smoke. Deborah blindfolded him again, gently this time, as if trying to make the act less frightening. He could hear the crunch of her boots on the gravel, the rustle of dry leaves underfoot. When she led him to the car, her hands were shaking. Neither of them spoke during the drive. The engine hummed, the tires whispered against the empty road. Ethan counted every turn, every stop, trying to memorize the route in case he ever needed to tell the police. But soon he lost track. Time blurred. His mind was somewhere between fear and exhaustion. When the car finally slowed, Deborah stopped without warning. The silence was deafening again. The blindfold came off. They were on a deserted stretch of highway, the faint lights of a distant town, glowing miles away. The early dawn painted everything silver. The trees, the road, even the hood of her SUV. Deborah looked at him one last time. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She reached out, almost touched his hand, then pulled away. "God bless you," she said quietly. "Don't tell anyone about this." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped out, closed the door, and stood still as the SUV rolled away, its red taillights fading into the fog until they vanished completely. He started walking. The cold morning air burned his lungs. His shoes scraped against the gravel, echoing through the emptiness. Every few seconds he looked over his shoulder, half expecting her to come back. She never did. By the time he reached the first streetlight near shallow water, the sun had started to rise. He was numb, not just from fear, but from disbelief that he was still alive. When he finally reached home, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He called the sheriff's department just after 6 o'clock a.m. The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, but distant, as if she'd heard 100 stories like his before. 2 officers arrived an hour later. They listened as Ethan described everything. The party, the SUV, the woman, the barn. They took notes, exchanged glances, and finally said the words he dreaded. "No witnesses, no plate number. No address. We'll file it as unverified." The report ended up in a small folder labeled Unconfirmed Incident, Halloween Night. That was it. No investigation and no follow-up, no name. And Deborah, if that was even her real name, was never found. No SUV matching her description. No record of anyone in the county with a daughter that age. Nothing. In the months that followed, Ethan stopped going out at night. He changed his phone number. He deleted social media. When people asked what happened that Halloween, he just said, "Nothing much, just a long walk home." But every October, when the air gets cold and the roads fill with mist, he says he still sees headlights in his dreams. Sometimes he wakes up to the faint sound of a woman's voice, whispering from somewhere in the dark. God bless you. End, fade to black with soft documentary outro music, on-screen text. Based on real accounts of reported roadside abductions across rural Texas. Story 3, coming soon, that says The Prison Without a Name.